In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. You are watching Hadi TV. This is the first program in which we have a special guest, Dr. Efatossadat Merqati Khoui. She is a specialist in the field of sexology. She's brought up in a religious family in Iran. She's completed her specialty in a Western country. Dr. Merqati Khoui, could you please introduce yourself for us? Thank you very much.
In the name of Allah, thank you very much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. I would like to introduce myself a little bit more than what you did. That you're absolutely right. I brought up in a very religious family and in a cleric family, I should say. My background is midwifery, and during all my working years, I had experiences working with women, families, and with all members of families, I would say. And I got my maternal and child health master from the university, and during all these years, I came across with some problems about sexuality matters. In the context I was working, it was a bit difficult to work in sexuality at that time. But that's why I decided to go abroad to pursue my PhD in sexuality and all related matters. And I completed my PhD, and I'm really proud of myself to be able to do this as a Muslim woman.
Yes.
Because I believe in the society of sexuality, in the field of sexuality, there are maybe a few Muslim women involved with sexuality and dare enough to talk about sexuality.
That's right.
So I would be more than happy if you have any more questions.
Yeah, and that is the most important part of this, conversation. Most of the people, most of the Islamic Muslims think that Islam doesn't have anything, any perspectives, or any talks about this important part of human being. And with this conversation, we want to make it more clear for our watcher in this program, And could you please have an introduction about this sexual relationship?
Yes, but first of all, there are many different definitions for the word sexuality in different books and different materials. But what I would like to mention is the main aspects of sexuality or sex: biological or psychological sex, gender identity, gender roles, and sexual orientation, and so on.
That's very good. Could you please explain about that sexual orientation?
Okay.
Thank you.
Sexual orientation refers to emotional, romantic, and sexual affections, attractions, which happens from between persons, and it could be different from person to person, to another person or persons. It's
so it
a
is
sort of
something
attraction.
biological, isn't it?
It's not absolutely biological. It's as I said, it's originated from attraction, attraction between two individuals or one person with another person or persons. It's sort of orientation that we know ourselves as we are, and sometimes it goes back to our biology, and you can be oriented as a feminine because your sex is XX, but sometimes it's deviant, it's different from what you are, and but there are many discussions around it, and I think
That's right.
but our focus is Islamic perspective on sexuality.
Is there anything in Islam about this? I said at the introduction that most of the Muslims think that there isn't anything in Islam about it. Is there anything? And could you please explain about your perspectives of Islam about this?
Yeah, of course there is. There's so many things that we can talk. But in Islam, sexuality is considered part of our identity too, as the other school of thought thing, as a human beings. In His creation of humankind, God distinguished us from any other animals by giving us a reason and a will, such that we can manage and control our behaviors, because we can think and we can decide and we can take action, and we have control and manage good management on our behaviors. And this is a difference between us and animals and even angels, because angels can just think and wisely, but human beings has got instinct as well. So it's very important for us as a human being to think, decide, and manage our sexual instincts. That's why we are different from animals. So it's a very basic principles or philosophy in Islam about sexuality and human beings.
So why most of the families ignore this, never talk about it and never maybe think about it, do not let their children to ask about this notion in their families?
Which families do you mean? In Islamic societies or all
no,
families?
in Islamic societies,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In some of the Islamic societies, that people think it's very shameful and sinful even talking about sexuality. But what I would like to mention is that both Quran and Hadith emphasis on the nature of sexual attraction, good interaction between wife and husband, first of all, of course, within bond of marriage. So, and also Islam emphasis, we've got many references in Islamic materials. What I mean by Islamic materials is specifically Quran and Hadith, is that talking about closeness and compassion between husband and wife. As I said, the marital institution is very important, and Islamic materials emphasis on marriage contract. So, as you know, extramarital relationships is not accepted in Islamic principles. But it's still, some societies, just mentioning sex is considered shameful and even sinful. It's a very I think I'm really sorry about these families.
You mean that Islam said no, talking about this notion is not sinful?
That's what they perceive. It's not in original Islam, but that's what families mixing traditions with Islamic principles, and sometimes mixing old traditions and misinterpretation with what is in original Islam, and then they're practicing all these misinterpretation and mixture of their own culture and traditions and customs with Islamic principles and teaching their children or member of families. So it's not actually general. It's very contextual. In some families, as I said, I would like to emphasize that in some families it happens. And this results in nothing but a very harmful ignorance of this sort of matters in the world of, say, HIV epidemic. That's what I mean by harmful ignorance.
Yeah, that is. And could you please explain about some of the fundamental philosophy of the sexology in Islam? Islamic, philosophy.
If you don't mind, before I go to this fundamental philosophy, there are many fundamental philosophy, but what I would like is just, I think, 5 or 6 of those. But before moving to this issue, I would like to clarify myself by saying harmful ignorance.
What is it?
What is it? In some societies, but around the world, it's common. It doesn't specifically talking about Islamic society, but But at the moment, our concern is Islamic societies. And what does it mean by harmful ignorance? As you know, that some families are not aware of a big gap which happens nowadays between different generations. Generation like our parents think in one way and our children thinking in another way, because they have access to many kind of information.
Multimedia, yeah.
And worldwide communication causes children think more deeply, and they got more information. So this wide gap,
Bombing of information.
exactly,
Yeah.
yes, bombing of information for children and youth, adolescents, and all those this new generation, and this connection between parents and this new generation due to this bombing of information cause that the children know much better than their parents,
Or much more than their parents.
much more than their parents about sexuality matters. And for two main reasons, they're not going back to their parents. One is that their family doesn't believe that the children have right to talk about sexuality. And so the children are reluctant to communicate with their parents about sexuality matters, based on the theory that you mentioned, that some Islamic Muslim families think that talking about sexuality is shameful and sinful and so on. This is the first reason. The second reason is that they don't trust their parents, because their parents hasn't got enough knowledge about sexuality, again based on the ignorance that I mentioned before. So the new generation, my practice, my experiences during the very short time that I'm working in this context shows that the new generation doesn't trust to the second generation, yes, and that's why they absolutely disconnected with their parents. But as you know, our first educators are our parents, and specifically Islam emphasis on importance of family and consultation or whatever is happening within families. So that's a very, I think from my point of view, is a very harmful ignorance which happening between Muslim families at the moment.
Yeah, so by this harmful ignorance, you mean that so many diseases like HIV and AIDS are going to be improved and increased in the societies?
Yeah, I'm not actually generalizing my views to different societies. For example, Muslim families are living in Western societies, and they are open to some sort of discussions, sexuality-related discussions. But most of the families in conservative societies, they're reluctant to talk about sexuality matters. And unfortunately, the belief that living in Islamic society will protect us from HIV transmission is happening at the moment. And most of the family which I have experiences with, they believe that the HIV is not their disease, and they never ever get HIV virus because they're Muslim. And is in Islam, sexual relationship out of marriage is forbidden. But the fact is that the young generation are doing whatever they like.
That is the gap between the generations.
But they don't mind. They don't mind that what Islam says, because actually, I strongly believe that our new generation are far away from Islamic thoughts.
That is.
Because they are involved and they are engaged with other things than Islamic principles. What they hear and what they learn is what is very general things. You know what I mean by general principles, and saying that this is good and this is bad because Islam says this this is good or bad. But new generation needs
make another question: why? Why is it bad and
exactly,
why?
and they want to know the philosophy
That is.
behind this. You know, just forbidden things, and why we're saying no, why we're saying yes. And they are very intelligent and smart generation, and we have to be careful about this.
Yeah, that is. Thank you very much. And now, could you please explain about those?
Yes. Okay. Apart from some misinterpretation of Islamic principles or Islamic codes, original Islam, I mentioned actually before that what I mean by original Islam is what represented in Quran and Sunnah.
Yeah.
Was the first to put a grant for sex and sexuality rules to be taken over in the right way, which it does not all negate it.
Yeah.
And it's, I strongly believe again that it's not negated. And on the contrary is actually, it actually confirmed what modern science came with and proved. What I would like to mention, the five main foundation is that the Islamic morals and their compatibility with the objective requirements of natural growth of sexuality as part of inborn human instincts.
Could you please explain about that?
And potentiality.
Yeah.
It means that whatever is known as Islamic morals or Islamic ethical codes, there is nothing in contrast with the nature of human beings' growth or instinct. Sexual instincts is a very natural things, human being born with this instinct. So whatever is Islamic morality or Islamic ethical codes, it's compatible with this nature. Do you know what I mean? It means that whatever is your potentiality in sexuality, you can be innovative about it. You can show, and there is nothing wrong with that if you think of Islamic morality and you take into consideration the Islamic ethical codes. Is that?
You mean that thought and instinct are compatible with each other in human being, and from the first day of born, the human being have both of them.
Yes, and Islamic morality doesn't have any incompatibility with this sort of potentiality in human beings.
Yeah.
I mean, Islam doesn't say something and God created human beings in another way.
Yeah.
So they are
compatible. Yeah,
yes.
Thank you.
And the second foundation, what I would like to mention is that promoting humanity concerning the prohibited acts. If you like to have an example, I can actually give you an example like extramarital relationships. If it's prohibited and forbidden in Islam, it's sort of protecting humanity. And this is the very good example that just came across my mind. And the third one is modernistic sexual tolerance as a major cause of sexual or sex-oriented sexual template, sex-oriented deviation of human behavior. Preventing, this is happening, just to prevent the healthy development or to provide healthy development of the sexual template of an individual. That means, in other words, is Quran has a very, very good tolerance talking about sexual deviations even before modern science get to, for example, the matter of homosexuality. We cannot really accept actually I cannot accept as a Muslim to say that the sexual deviation is not mentioned in Quran. It's absolutely mentioned, and what we have to do is to do more research about these principles which mentioned in Quran about sexual deviations. Um, what I really would like to say is that modernistic sexuality behavior is well known in Quran. So we need some specialist researchers to go through all these issues and get investigation more deeply. And it's not enough to say that homosexuality
It's
doesn't
forbidden.
exist
Uh-huh.
in Islam. It exists, but how we should manage it needs more research and more Islamic, say, scholars to come, in the field and
Yes.
work more and more. And the fourth one I would like to mention is sexual morality again, as compared to general ethical conducts in economic or politics fields. In whatever is mentioned in Islam very deeply, like economy, politics, society, and all those issues that you can find in Quran, sexuality is the same. So it doesn't mean that as a Muslim reference, Quran doesn't say anything about sexuality. I think the beautiful things is said in Quran about sexuality. Again, we need more specialists to think of it and to work on it and just talk about it in details. As you know, whatever is in Quran, from my own perspective, is a sort of pattern. But if we want to change this pattern to practice, we need some specialists to sit down and work on these issues. It's not enough to say to lay population that, for example, masturbation is forbidden or homosexuality, this and that. But we have to convince people with working on these issues and changing this pattern to more practical issues, and the people can experience in their daily life. Otherwise, they just learn, and this is sort of knowledge, and people can hear and forget it just a minute later. So that's why I would like to say that we need some specialists, Muslim specialists, to work on these issues. Yes, and maybe the last one I would say is availability of love partners and their behavior towards the love affair, love and harmonious growth of human personality. The beautiful words has been said in Quran about love and how we can exchange love between two persons. So this is what I would like to mention.
Thank you very much. And another question. You talk about so many principles in Quran said, okay, but what about Islamic culture? We are going to make the Islamic culture, compatible with these principles and with these notions. These are all in Quran, but maybe you say our last generation never taught us or never talk about them. Now, could you please explain about this culture?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. What I learned during my studies is that the sexuality is something socially constructed. So if we want to take into consideration this sexuality matters, we have to work in our own context, and we need to explore the cultural context and cultural construction of the matters exactly in the same society that we're working with. In the Islamic construction of sexuality, I can mention actually some points which is very practical, and we have to take into consideration.
Sorry, you mean that different cultures have different principles about sexology and sexuality? You mean that each culture should have its main principles differ from others?
Of course, yes. If we, apart from the essence of sexuality or instinct that we already talked about, the human beings is born with this instinct, but management of or regulation of this essence is socially constructed and is very, very culturally specific. So any society around the world has got their own codes and their own framework to regulate sexual behaviors. But I think that around the world, all specialists in sexuality may accept this notion that we have to work in our own framework. Working in our own framework, I don't mean necessarily to limit the matter of sexuality. I mean that just attaching our ethical codes, religious codes, and social codes to manage and handle the sexual behaviors. And in Islamic societies, we've got our own codes, but we have to work on it. And again, I would say that to change it into practice, very good practice, and teach people, Muslim people, how to use these codes to handle their own sexual behaviors.
Yeah, thank you. We are continuing.
But I think
about the culture construction.
But I will explain about the Islamic construction of sexuality in your second program, if there is any.
Yeah, of course. And thank you very much for your participation in this program today. We do not have got enough time to continue, You're welcome. And we are waiting for your feedback for the next program in which we come back to you. Thank you very much. And this program will be continued.